Hello everybody, I'm Colin D. Ellis and welcome to the Culture and Coffee podcast, where every episode I discuss a new topic of workplace culture and provide some insights and some practical things for you to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe and to share with people who you may think would be interested. Okay, let's get on with today's episode. Hello everybody, it's Colin here. Welcome to today's session. I'm talking about everybody's favourite topic today, which is AI. It's one of those things. I talked about it earlier in the year. I think I talked about it like May or something like that, where I released a podcast or a video talking about technology and AI. And the hype has only increased since then, and it is literally so. There's two questions that I guess get asked with regards to AI, which I'm going to talk about today. Is firstly, how will it change work? And secondly, do you use it? So let's deal with the second one first. Do I use it? Yes, of course I use it, because certainly in my profession and doing the work that I do, I really have to not only understand the technology, I have to understand the research behind the technology, I have to understand how it works, in order to be able to talk learnedly to clients and in speeches about the value that AI can potentially add. And it is potentially, I'll talk about that in a second, potentially add. So I can't do that just by reading loads and loads of blogs and loads of books, even though I've done both of those things. Well, not loads of books. I've read one book, but that was enough, frankly. For now, I'll wait till it becomes more evolved. So you can't do it. You have to actually use it. And so what do I use it for? Well, primarily I use it for research, and where I found it to be really valuable. For those of you who know me, who know my work, what I don't want to do is use research that's out of date. I like to use research from within the last 3 years, because I think that gives my work relevance. You know, when I look at, kind of particularly consulting firms and others in this space, they tend to use stuff from like 15, 20 years ago. There are people still misquoting things like that Maya Angelou quote, people, forget who you are and all that. That's not a Maya Angelou quote, by the way. So I don't know how I got onto that. So, for me, it's really, really important that I use up to date, especially post-COVID, because the world of work changed post-COVID. And so what I will do is I use Claude predominantly. I don't use ChatGPT. I tried ChatGPT and it was fine, but I much prefer Claude.ai. And I will say, provide some evidence-based research that demonstrates, why flexible working is so important to cultures, for example. And the research has to be within the last 3 years. Now, of course, when I first started using ChatGPT, it wouldn't do it because it was massively out of date. So for me at that point, I'm like, what's the point of using this? It's not going to give me what I want. But Claude now is much more up to date. I don't use it to write. I think I want to make that really, really clear. And for anybody that reads my blog, and if you still haven't subscribed to the blog, get on that, because I'm going to ramp up the amount of things that I write next year, because firstly, I really enjoy it, and secondly, there's a lot of value that I can provide to people through that writing. So that's www.colindellis.com/boom. But I write my own stuff. So whenever I write a blog, whenever I write one of these sessions, what I will produce is what's called a knowledge sheet, and that knowledge sheet will include like a model. It's loosely based on the pink sheet model from Matt Church and Peter Cook from their Thought Leaders Practice book. But I've expanded it to kind of suit me. So for example, I've got a knowledge sheet on artificial intelligence, and in there I will have a model, I will have some statistics, I will have anecdotes from my own work, I will have quotes from people about artificial intelligence, I will have case studies, either case studies from my own work or case studies out in the world right now. And so these knowledge sheets really inform my work. And so I will spend about 2 hours writing a knowledge sheet. And then the great thing is once I've written it, then I can just update it. So if I want to do another, say, I want to write a blog on AI in the new year, let's say probably March, April, when it's evolved again, then I will just go back, look at the latest research, look for some case studies. And that's where AI can really, really help. It's for me, I suppose it's more succinct than a Google search. I feel like in the past I wasted a lot of time Googling stuff. But then once I've used it, I still have to go and check it and verify it. So what it does, it will say, the paper, they never give you a web link. So I always have to go and look for the web link. And then I check that what AI has given me is correct. So there's a bit of a process, but I easily save myself when I'm writing a knowledge sheet using AI now. Something that would have taken me 2 to 3 hours in the past probably takes me 1 to 2 hours, and that 1 hour makes a hell of a difference. So yes, I do use it. Will I use it more? Possibly. It depends. I won't let it take my voice. I won't let it necessarily take my content, although I did feed it my content for today's show, which you're going to see in a minute. But no, I've done all the hard work. Why should AI take all that off me? Definitely not. And there's the usual things is we're not going to use it for training purposes and all this kind of stuff. Okay, we can definitely trust the tech companies. Not a conspiracy theorist, but they're always finding an angle. There's always something in those really long terms and conditions that they know we'll never read. That's a bit of a gotcha. So I always write my own stuff. That answers that second question. Will it change the world of work? Was the other question. Yeah, of course it will, but not immediately. And so I read some research just this week and this is stuff that comes into my feed automatically. I have these searches set up. That 57% of Generation Z think that AI will make their job easier, and yet 42% of them are concerned on its impact on employment opportunities. And there was the survey from Goldman Sachs that said, that I think it was Goldman Sachs, 300 million jobs could be lost over time. I'm pretty sure that was Goldman Sachs. And that's not unreasonable. It's the biggest shift since the Industrial Revolution. But, and you'll hear a bit later in the show, the productivity J curve basically says, and the productivity J curve was produced by a group of researchers, Bryn Jolson, in 2018. And I'm paraphrasing it in a very Northern English way here, is at first the technology is rubbish and we completely overestimate its capabilities, and then it becomes good, right? So there's a bit of a time lag, although I'm still waiting for Microsoft Teams to get good, to be perfectly honest with you. It is good, Colin, it is. Yeah, sure, whatever. All those notifications, don't even get me started. So why is this called the AI show today? Because what I wanted to do was to demonstrate an element of AI that's useful using my own content. So I just mentioned that I write these knowledge sheets. And so in preparation for today's show, I already had a knowledge sheet on AI because I wrote about it in my latest books, Detox Your Culture. I talked about how organizations, in order to kind of mitigate the risk of toxicity, need to make sure that people really know how to use AI. And then they're not just implementing AI and then they just get rid of a load of people. Because let's face it, business's primary reason for using AI is to make money or save money. Don't think for any other reason. It's for any other reason. Sure, using data to get smarter. Sure, all of those things. Market insights. Sure, I get all of that. Make money or save money. I read some research that said only 36% of people had been taught how to use AI. So I thought I'd do the show, call it the AI show, but actually get AI to do the show for me. So I wrote my knowledge sheet. And then what I did was I used the Google tool Notebook LM. All right, so it's just called Notebook LM, M for mother, LM.google.com. And essentially what you do is you can create a notebook of information. And so what I did is I created a notebook on AI. And what I did was I uploaded knowledge sheets into that notebook that I felt would be relevant to generating content for this podcast. So I uploaded my knowledge sheet for AI. I also uploaded my knowledge sheet for collaboration and generally for culture. And in the knowledge sheet is the productivity J-curve model. There's the statistics that I've collected over the last 18 months. There's anecdotes, there's case studies, all of these things. And so what then I asked Notebook LM to do is to use what I'd uploaded and to generate a 10-minute podcast from that. Yeah, no, I know, really. I asked them to generate a 10-minute podcast, but not a transcript. An actual podcast, which is a discussion between two people. Now, this is something that I was only made aware of a couple of weeks ago. My wife had sent me an article. That's what we do in our house. We trade business blogs. But she sent me this article about, kind of how this tool can do this. And I'm like, that is fascinating. I've got to give that a go. So what you're going to hear next is 10 minutes of a show that AI completely produced, right? And it's completely produced using my information. All right. So everything that you hear, I've given it. And I also asked it a question in a specific way, which I'll tell you about once the podcast finishes. So what you're going to hear now is two people, they're not people, two AI generated people, whatever we call them, good actors, because they're using my information, not bad actors. Two people talking about AI. All right, here we go.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. This time we're taking a look at AI and culture. It's a pretty hot topic these days, right? And you guys sent in some seriously interesting stuff for us to dig into. We've got knowledge sheets on AI, culture, diversity, even leadership and football culture, which I gotta say, I'm kind of curious about that one myself. But first, let's talk about the big picture for a sec. AI is seriously changing how we work, how we live, and honestly, it's causing a lot of anxiety too. Like one of the stats you sent over said almost 60% of young people are actually worried about how AI will impact society.
That's a significant number, yeah.
And then you've got the IMF predicting huge disruptions in the job market.
Right. And I think it's important to start by acknowledging that this isn't just hype. AI has the potential to be really disruptive.
Okay, so how disruptive are we talking? Like what kind of changes can we actually expect to see? Well, one way to visualize this is through what's called the productivity J-curve.
Yeah.
You actually included a visual of it in the source material. It's super helpful. Basically, it shows that when a big new technology comes along, there's often an initial dip in productivity.
So not all instant robots and flying cars then.
Not quite. But think about it. Everyone's trying to learn the new systems, figure out how to adapt their workflows, honestly, just how to use the darn thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes time and resources, leading to a temporary slowdown.
It's like when you get a new phone and spend the first week just figuring out where all the apps went.
Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. After that initial dip, the J-curve predicts a huge upswing in productivity as society adapts and integrates the new technology. And we're already seeing predictions about this with AI. Like Goldman Sachs estimates that this AI-driven productivity surge will really kick in around 2027.
2027, huh? Why that year specifically?
It's probably a combination of things. Advancements in AI itself, wider adoption by businesses, and most importantly, a workforce that's trained to actually use AI. It's not a sudden change, but a gradual build-up to a tipping point.
Okay, that makes sense. But then there's the other side of this productivity boom, right? All those fears about job displacement.
Right, and we're already seeing signs of this in the early part of the J-curve. You highlighted a stat showing a 21% drop in demand for freelance writers, coders, and app developers since ChatGPT launched.
Wow, 21%. That's a pretty big drop.
It is, and it suggests some businesses are already trying to use AI tools to replace certain roles.
So we've got this potential for amazing productivity gains on the horizon, but also this real anxiety about what it means for people's jobs and livelihoods. It's like we're on the edge of something totally new and unknown.
It's definitely a time of huge change and transition. And that leads us to another crucial piece of the puzzle: culture. How do we build and keep a strong, adaptable culture at work? And frankly, in society as a whole, when the very idea of work is changing so fast.
And how do we make sure it's a good culture? You know, we have this stat here that says only 3% of leaders feel confident about their ability to build a great culture, which honestly isn't super reassuring.
No, it's definitely concerning. And it makes me think about how AI could change not just work, but us as people too.
Change us. What do you mean?
Well, for example, some call centers are using emotion-canceling AI. Imagine you're a customer service rep dealing with a tough customer, someone who's angry or even abusive. And now imagine this tech filtering your voice, making you sound calm and neutral no matter what's thrown at you.
Whoa, I hadn't thought about that. That's going to be a weird experience, almost like losing a part of yourself.
It raises questions about authenticity and emotional expression in the workplace. And it's not just call centers. Samsung and BT are developing facial recognition tools that can supposedly track employee emotions to improve cybersecurity.
Hold on, monitoring emotions for cybersecurity. How's that even work?
The idea is that if someone's stressed, they might be easier to trick with phishing scams or more vulnerable to other security threats. But of course, the same tech could also be used to track productivity or even assess someone's overall emotional state.
Okay, now that definitely sounds like it could cross the line. It's giving me dystopian sci-fi vibes, you know? Like, where's the line between helpful tech and just plain creepy surveillance?
It's a valid concern, and it highlights why psychological safety is so important, especially as AI becomes more and more integrated into our lives.
Psychological safety. I've heard that term before. Could you remind me what it actually means?
Sure, think of it as the feeling of being able to be yourself at work. To take risks, make mistakes, ask questions, even challenge things without being afraid of negative consequences. It's about feeling safe enough to be vulnerable and authentic. And one model that helps break down the elements of psychological safety is called the FVA model.
FVA. Okay, now I'm really curious. What does that stand for?
FVA stands for fallibility, accessibility, vulnerability, and accountability. Fallibility meaning you can admit mistakes without fear of punishment. Accessibility meaning feeling okay with asking for help or feedback. Vulnerability meaning you can share your ideas and concerns openly, even if they're not fully formed. And accountability meaning everyone's responsible for creating a safe and respectful environment.
So basically creating a space where everyone feels supported and encouraged to be their best selves.
Exactly. And when you think about it in the context of AI, it's even more important if we're asking people to work with intelligent machines, to adapt to completely new ways of working, and potentially even face job displacement, then creating a psychologically safe environment is absolutely essential.
That sounds like a huge responsibility for leaders. How do you even start to create this kind of culture when everything's changing so fast because of technology?
Well, Edgar Schein, who was a pioneer in organizational culture, once said, "Leadership is the fundamental process by which organizational cultures are formed and changed." And that's never been more true than it is right now.
So it all comes back to leadership. But what does that actually look like in practice? What can leaders actually do to shape a positive and resilient culture in this age of AI?
That's where we need to dive into some practical strategies and tools. And luckily, the knowledge sheets you sent offer some great insights on that.
Perfect. Let's dig into those strategies and see what we can learn.
One technique I find particularly helpful is the pre-mortem. It's a way of, anticipating problems before they actually happen. Kind of a thought experiment where you imagine the worst-case scenario.
Ooh, a pre-mortem. Sounds intense, but also kind of brilliant. Do you, gather everyone around a cauldron and...
No, not quite.
Yeah.
It's much less dramatic than that. Basically, the team leader gets their team together and says something like, okay, let's imagine our AI project totally failed a year from now. What were the biggest mistakes? What went wrong? How did we end up here?
I see. So you're working backward from a hypothetical disaster to figure out potential problems and avoid them.
Exactly. It forces you to think critically, consider different viewpoints,
Yeah.
and come up with backup plans just in case. It also creates a space for open and honest communication, which is huge for building trust.
That makes sense. It reminds me of something from the Netflix culture memo. They say, we don't preserve our culture, we seek to improve it. It's like this idea of always evolving and adapting, not being afraid to try things out and learn from mistakes.
That's a great connection. It highlights the importance of having a growth mindset, especially when it comes to using AI at work. It's not about finding the perfect solution right away. It's about being willing to try things, learn, and adjust as you go.
So embrace the uncertainty and see it as a chance to grow, both individually and as a team.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key part of building a strong culture in the AI age: collaboration.
Collaboration. But if AI is automating so many tasks, wouldn't we need less collaboration, not more?
That's a common assumption, but it's not quite right. The truth is, as AI takes over more routine tasks, the ability for humans to work together effectively becomes even more important.
Okay, I'm listening.
Think about it. AI can crunch data and find insights super fast, but it's still humans who need to interpret those insights, make decisions, and ultimately drive innovation.
So AI is like the engine, but we're still the ones steering.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And to steer effectively, we need diverse perspectives, different approaches to problem solving, and the ability to communicate and work together smoothly. That's where cognitive diversity comes in.
Cognitive diversity, is that just a fancy way of saying different ways of thinking?
Pretty much, yeah. It means having people on your team who see things from different angles, people with different strengths, different weaknesses, who can challenge each other's assumptions. And this is even more important when you're working with AI, because you need that human element to balance out any biases or limitations the technology might have.
Gotcha. But there's also the human side of things, right? If AI changes how we work so much, how do we keep that sense of connection and belonging that's so important for a good culture?
That's a great question. It makes me think of this fascinating concept called identity fusion theory.
Identity fusion. Okay, you're going to have to explain that one. I've never heard of it.
It's a pretty new theory that came out of research into terrorism, actually, but it's surprisingly relevant to the workplace, too. Essentially, identity fusion theory describes this powerful feeling of oneness, of belonging to a group, to the point where people are willing to make big sacrifices for the collective, like a merging of your personal identity with the group identity.
Wait, so you're saying AI could actually lead to stronger connections between people? That seems kind of backwards. Wouldn't it make us more isolated?
It seems counterintuitive, yeah.
Ugh.
But think about it. If we're facing this huge tech disruption, all this uncertainty about what work will even look like in the future, wouldn't it make sense to want stronger connections, to find that sense of shared purpose?
I guess that makes sense. Like when things get tough, we naturally want to band together.
Exactly. And identity fusion theory suggests one way to do that is to build a sense of shared identity within teams and organizations. Create a culture where people feel like they're part of something bigger, where they're valued for what makes them unique, and where they're working toward a common goal.
So it's not about humans versus machines. It's about humans and machines working together in this new world.
Precisely. And that needs a shift in how we think, a willingness to embrace change, and a commitment to building a culture that's both innovative and human-centered.
Sounds like a tall order, but also pretty exciting.
It is. It asks us to think hard about the values and principles that will guide us as we navigate this new territory.
And speaking of values and principles, I think it's time to talk about another big piece of AI and culture: ethics. There's been a lot of discussion about bias in algorithms, about the potential for AI to make existing inequalities worse, and even about the need for some kind of ethical framework to guide how we develop and use AI.
You're absolutely right. The ethical implications of AI are huge and complex.
Yeah.
And they need our full attention. That's where our next set of knowledge sheets comes in.
Perfect. Let's dive into those ethical considerations and see what we can learn. So we've talked about how AI could really shake things up in the workplace, about the need for leaders to, really step up and guide us through this, and the importance of awesome teamwork in this new world of AI. It feels like we're getting to a pretty big question here. If AI is going to be everywhere, what does that mean for each of us individually?
You've hit the nail on the head. It's not just about company culture anymore, is it? It's almost like we need to start thinking about our own personal culture.
Our own personal culture. Okay, now I'm intrigued.
Yeah, think about it. How do we as individuals keep learning, keep growing, stay sane even, in a world where tech is changing so fast?
Right. It's like AI is pushing us to define what really matters to us on a personal level.
And that brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with. AI is amazing, right? It can automate tasks, even entire industries. But there's one thing it can't replicate: that human spark. The spark for curiosity, adaptation, that search for meaning.
I like that. It's a good reminder that even with all this crazy tech stuff happening, we still have choices, right? We choose how we react, how we learn, how we make our own way in the world.
Exactly. So as you keep thinking about all this, I encourage you to ask yourself, what are the values, the habits, the things you do that will help you not just survive, but actually thrive in this age of AI? What kind of personal culture will let you embrace all the possibilities while staying true to yourself?
Those are great questions. Wow, I feel like we covered a lot of ground today. From how AI is changing work to these really big ideas about culture. in companies and for ourselves.
It's been a great conversation for sure.
Well, thanks for being here and guiding us through it all. And to everyone listening out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into AI and culture. We hope you found it insightful, maybe even inspiring. Until next time, keep those knowledge sheets coming and keep exploring.
It's pretty mad, that, isn't it? It's pretty crazy. So what I did after I generated it, I'm like, so what you'll have noticed if you listened all the way through, and I really hope you did, but what you'll have noticed is that it also talks about the negatives. So I deliberately included the negatives because I was fascinated to see if it would edit that out itself. I was just fascinated to see whether it would, but it didn't. It really, really didn't. And in fact, the productivity J curve, I was really impressed with the way that it talked about that, which is why I gave you the Northern English view at the start, the rubbish way of talking about it, because they talked way more learnedly about it. Was I impressed? 100%. I was impressed. Would I do it again? No. Would I actually do it for my own job? Like if I lost my voice and I'd committed to do a podcast or I'd committed to do a session like this for people who'd been paying for my work, well, then I would declare it up front and say, listen, I've completely lost my voice. The doctor has ordered a week's break, so I'm going to do this anyway. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. And I think that's the thing, is that if you're going to use these tools, you have to be upfront about the fact that you're using them. And then, you have to really, really make sure that you're asking it the right question. And that was the thing for me with when I was using Notebook LM. And it's the same whenever I'm using Claude as an AI tool. The greatest value is in the question that you ask. All right. That's the most important thing to do, because if you ask the wrong question, you're very likely to get the wrong answer. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to make sure then that you check the content. So I listened to that podcast twice to make sure that there were no inaccuracies, and there weren't, because basically it was talking about everything that I'd fed it. It was still so strange to hear it, though, I have to say, because here's all this work that I've done, here's all this research, and there's two people, not really, these two AI generated people talking about all of the things that I'd researched and all the things that I'd written. It was pretty cool. So I talked about the emotion canceling stuff. I included the emotional canceling stuff, which they talked about. They talked about the negatives. They talked about the positives. So, for me, it was a really great insight into the value that you can get from AI if that's what you wanted to do. It's not something I would do again. And, if anything, it would deny you the opportunity to see my face, which I'm sure for those of you watching the video, for those of you who listen to a podcast version of this, are like, thank God for that. We definitely don't want that. Yeah. So yeah, I hope you found it interesting. I really wanted to do this little experiment. I wanted to give a demonstration. I wanted to talk about AI. I wanted to talk about the, kind of how I used it. But also, for me, the key point here, the key takeaway for you is that when it comes to AI, we're still in the very, very early stages, and curiosity is key here. And I know that, curiosity is one of those words that, people are not necessarily afraid of, but it's like, oh God, curiosity. Yeah, well, curiosity in the sense that, be open to new ideas, but also recognize that what we have right now is not the finished article. It has the potential to change many things, both positively and negatively. It really does. The second thing to take away is it needs really good inputs. So I've been known to ask Claude a question 4 times until I feel that it's answered it in the way that I would have liked, particularly with regards to, kind of research. If it doesn't give me exactly what I want, I asked it a question with regards to psychological safety not so long ago. It just didn't give me what I was looking for. And so I kind of asked it again, and then it gave me what I was kind of looking for. And then I went away and researched it and kind of matched the two. And then the third thing, which is linked to the second, it was linked to both of them actually, is if you don't teach people how to use it, it will just become another tool that people don't understand how to properly use, like email. Email is still misused so badly in organizations, and AI's got there's a danger that AI will go the same way if you don't teach people how to use it and how to get the value from it. Also, I think organizations need to be really, really upfront when they're asking people to use Microsoft Copilot, which I know some organizations are doing. You need to be really upfront with your employees as to what do you stand to gain as an organization from them using it? Because make no mistake, at some stage it will lead to litigation, probably from the US first. But it will. It really, really will, because somebody somewhere will take their organization to court for collecting their information nefariously. They will say, we never gave you permission to do this. When they make a raft of redundancies as a result of the fact that they now have the internal knowledge, they're able to program AI models or use AI models to answer basic questions and introduce more bots and all of these kinds of things. Again, I don't need to take that the wrong way in the sense that he only believes all these conspiracy theories. But it's true. It's based on experience. It's true. Mostly AI will be used to make money and save money, which, yes, for research, all of those things, but usually all paths lead to one of those two things, or save lives. That would be better. It'd be great if we just used it to save lives. That would be brilliant. So there's your takeaways from today. Like I said, I really hope you enjoyed it. It was a real eye opener for me. And so I hope you got something from it too. Ta-ra for now.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. If you'd like to find out more about how I can help you transform the culture of your team, head to my website at www.colindellis.com.